Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in. The stars around the mining colony of Veltrax 9 shimmered peacefully, giving no warning of what was to come. Floating nearby, half hidden behind a curtain of asteroid dust, was a vessel so massive, so still, that it could easily be mistaken for an abandoned station or a derelict cargo hauler. But it wasn't. No, this was something else. Something terrible. To the outer colonies, it had no name, just rumors. A ghost ship that never docked, never hailed, never missed. But to those who knew the truth, it had a designation burned into their memories: the Vindicator. When the Zarnak patrol cruiser first picked it up on long-range scans, its captain had laughed. "A human freighter this deep in neutral space," he scoffed. "Let's investigate. Maybe we'll get salvage rights." But as their scanners got closer, the laughter died. The data coming back didn't make sense. The hull was lined with strange material that absorbed energy like a sponge. The weapon readings spiked so high they had to recalibrate the system. But the worst part? The Vindicator wasn't sending out any signal. No lights, no beacons, just silence. And then it turned. The quiet ship shifted ever so slightly, angling just enough to reveal the massive cannon bays tucked beneath its lower decks, like a sleeping monster blinking awake. The Zarnak captain's voice broke as he whispered, "That's not a freighter." He was right. It wasn't a cargo ship. It wasn't even just a warship. It was something more. A response to betrayal. A warning forged into steel. A weapon built not just to win wars, but to erase threats. And it had noticed them. A low, pulsing hum filled the Zarnak bridge as the ship's sensors struggled to process the readings coming off the Vindicator. Captain Kareth stood frozen, his mandibles twitching in disbelief. Around him, his crew scrambled at their stations, voices tense and hushed. No one dared speak above a whisper, as if raising their voices might provoke the Colossus before them. "It's powering up," said the lieutenant at sensors, his voice thin and dry. "That can't be right," Kareth muttered, eyes locked onto the display. "That class of ship shouldn't even be here. Humans don't patrol this sector. We've scanned their routes for years. There's nothing like this in any known registry." "It's not a patrol ship, sir," the COMEM's officer whispered, pale under his mottled scales. "It's a deterrent." Kareth didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. The Vindicator's engines glowed with an unnatural hue, deep red like burning coals. Slow but steady, it rotated to face them directly. The silence was suffocating. No message, no warning. Just a presence so heavy it felt like gravity had doubled aboard their cruiser. Then the first lock came. One targeting beacon, then 2, then 20. Every major system aboard the Zarnak cruiser flashed crimson as weapons lock indicators bathed the bridge in a hellish glow. "No evasive route," the navigator said, voice cracking. "It's tracking all our projected movements before we even make them." Kareth's claws gripped the arms of his command chair. This isn't just a weapon. It's a test. They're waiting to see what we'll do." And that was when the realization settled over him like a shroud. This wasn't just about them. It wasn't about one alien ship or one trespass. No. The Vindicator had been built for something far greater, far darker. This was the answer to a question the galaxy hadn't dared ask yet. What would happen if humanity was betrayed? For years, the Galactic Concord had watched the humans with a careful, distant eye. They were new to the stars, brash, emotional, unpredictable, but they were also fast. In 2 short centuries, they had gone from building crude atmospheric engines to fielding ships that rivaled those of the oldest empires. What they lacked in age, they made up for with ferocity and innovation. Still, the Concord had made its choice. The humans were deemed manageable, primitive, dangerous only if provoked. So they were contained. Routes were blocked, trade deals were stalled, technologies were restricted under the guise of galactic safety, all in the name of peace. But it hadn't been peace. It had been fear. Fear that the humans would grow too strong, too fast. And behind closed doors, many of the older empires had made pacts to ensure humanity's influence stayed within its borders. Betrayals were made, treaties broken, surveillance satellites were placed in hidden orbit, research stations sabotaged, assassinations disguised as accidents. The humans had known. Not at first, maybe, but over time, they pieced it together. And they hadn't retaliated with fury. They hadn't lashed out. That was the mistake. They had waited. And in that silence, in that seething quiet rage, they had built this, the Vindicator. Not just a warship, not just a warning, but a promise. Captain Kareth rose slowly from his chair, mandibles tight. Power down all systems. Engines, shields, comms, everything. Sir? His first officer asked, stunned. If we blink wrong, that thing will tear us into atoms. This isn't a ship we're dealing with. It's a doctrine. They designed it not just to survive a war, but to erase anyone who tries to start one. Reluctantly, his crew obeyed. The lights dimmed, the engines cooled, the weapon systems went quiet. But still, the Vindicator did not speak. Kareth took a breath and stepped forward toward the central console. He tapped into the ship's emergency broadcast channel, fingers trembling. This is Captain Kareth of the Zarnak patrol vessel Spear of Light. We are powering down all systems. We mean no harm. We were unaware of human operations in this sector. Silence. Then, without warning, the Vindicator's hull shimmered. A pulse, barely visible, swept across its surface, like a ripple of heat above a desert. And a voice came through. It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It was calm. Too calm. Captain Kareth, you are in violation of restricted space. Your ship has been scanned. Your species is recognized. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Recognized? That meant the humans had studied them, knew them. But this system wasn't even on any known human expansion map. Why were they here? You will leave this sector immediately, the voice continued. You will not return. You will not speak of this encounter to your command. Any breach of this protocol will be considered hostile. The line went dead. No room for negotiation, no chance to argue, just an order. But Kareth wasn't thinking about diplomacy anymore. He was thinking about what he had just seen and what it meant. This ship, this Vindicator, was a response to betrayal, but not just retaliation against the Zarnak. This was a message to everyone. The humans knew. They knew about the sabotage, the lies, the betrayal, and they weren't looking to settle the score with courts or councils. They were preparing for the collapse of trust, of everything. If a war broke out, the first strike wouldn't come from politics. It wouldn't come from a declaration. It would come from the Vindicator. And if this was just one ship, how many more had they built in secret? What was the price of betrayal truly? It wasn't a battle. It was total annihilation. Kareth didn't speak for a long time. Not until the ship was far away, speeding back toward known space. When he finally opened his mouth, his voice was hollow. Record this event. Encrypt it. Send it to High Command. And no one else. And what do we say, Captain? His comms officer asked. Kareth stared out the viewport at the shrinking speck of the Vindicator behind them. We tell them the humans are no longer planning for a seat at the table. They're planning for the day the table is flipped. And somewhere, far behind them, in the shadowed dust belt of Sector 9, the Vindicator remained still once more. Watching. Waiting. Like a wound that hadn't healed, only grown quiet. For now. The journey back to Zarnak space was silent. Captain Kareth remained still in his chair, his gaze never leaving the streaking stars beyond the bridge viewport. The Vindicator was no longer visible, but its presence hung in his mind like a dark fog that refused to lift. Every detail, every line of that ship was burned into his memory. Not just its size or weaponry, but its silence. He had seen powerful vessels before, even served aboard a Dread-class flagship during the Sector rebellions. But nothing in his life had prepared him for that. There was no bluster, no theatrics. The Vindicator had simply existed, with the quiet confidence of something that knew it could end you, but chose not to. He didn't understand the humans before. Not truly. He'd always thought of them as rash, reactive. They pushed too hard, too fast, always building, always moving, driven by some desperate urge to prove themselves to the older species of the galaxy. It was almost comical, how much effort they put into catching up. But now, he saw the truth. They hadn't been trying to catch up. They had been preparing. And they weren't preparing for war with the rest of the galaxy. They were preparing for something worse. Kareth's mind drifted back to what the Vindicator had said. Not the threat, not the command to leave, but the most subtle detail. You will not speak of this encounter to your command. Why? Why would they care if someone talked about them? Unless secrecy was part of the strategy. The humans didn't just want to be feared. They wanted to remain uncalculated, unknown, unchallenged. The Vindicator wasn't just a deterrent. It was a test. And the Zarnak had failed it. If the humans had wanted them gone, the ship would have never made it back to relay the story. That meant something else was at play. A deeper purpose behind the silence. A secret that hadn't yet reached the rest of the galaxy. As the spear of light entered Zarnak-controlled space, Kareth stood from his chair. His voice, when he spoke, was sharper than usual. Commander Velis, meet me in the secure chamber, immediately. The bridge officer saluted and followed, the two disappearing behind the reinforced bulkhead near the back of the command deck. The room beyond was dark and narrow, lined with old data core ports and shielded from external transmission by heavy carbon weave plating. Kareth activated the room's terminal, entered his command code, and pulled up the ship's sensor archive. He hadn't stopped the scans during the encounter. Not completely. In secret, He'd rerouted them through the auxiliary comms relay, logging every bit of telemetry, energy readout, and signal frequency that had come off the Vindicator during the brief standoff. The data had only just finished decrypting. What he saw chilled him deeper than anything yet. The Vindicator's hull emitted energy readings that didn't match any known materials in the galactic database. Its core signature was completely foreign. No fission, no fusion, not even dark matter cycling. It didn't operate like a ship. It pulsed like a living thing. "Are you seeing this?" he asked quietly. Velis leaned over his shoulder, studying the waveform patterns, eyes narrowing. "That's not a standard reactor." "No," Kareth muttered. "It's not." There were other anomalies, too. The ship's interior heat signature was strangely cold in some areas, artificially dampened. Others burned too hot to be mechanical. In several scans, the system had flagged non-physical interference, energy sources with no origin. Some of them even reached back toward the Zarnak cruiser, touching its systems like curious fingers before vanishing again. Kareth scrolled through the logs, and then he found the last entry. A spike, barely visible, but there. A single packet of data transmitted in a tight beam burst toward the Vindicator, encoded in a way his systems couldn't identify. It hadn't come from the Zarnak ship. It hadn't come from anywhere known. It had come from somewhere else. Kareth stood up so fast the chair toppled behind him. "They were waiting for us." Velis blinked. "Sir?" "They didn't just find us. They expected us. That message wasn't for us. It was to the Vindicator. A signal. Confirmation. Something told them we were coming." "You think we walked into a trap?" "No," Kareth said. "I think we walked into a demonstration." He rubbed the back of his neck, pacing now. "Something's happening, Velis. This isn't just about one ship in a quiet system. The humans didn't put that monster there by accident. They wanted us to see it, but not to start a war. They're not trying to scare us." Velis hesitated. "Then what are they doing?" Kareth turned to face him. "They're sending a message to everyone, to every species that betrayed them. They're saying, 'We know. We remember. And when the time comes, you'll understand what you set in motion.'" Silence filled the room. Then Kareth spoke again, voice firm. "Start composing a report, one that doesn't raise too many alarms, but make sure it includes everything we saw. I'll deliver it personally to the High Ministry. No digital transmissions, no relays." Velis nodded, his expression unreadable. "And the real data?" he asked. Kareth's jaw tightened. "We don't send it. Not yet. Not until I know who in the Ministry we can trust." As Velis left the chamber, Kareth turned back toward the screen. The waveforms from the Vindicator were still displayed, still pulsing in that strange, slow rhythm. Alive. Watching. Waiting. Whatever the humans had created, it wasn't just for defense. It wasn't even for vengeance. It was preparation. And that meant something terrible was on its way. And the humans, they were ready. The others, they had no idea what was coming. Captain Kareth didn't sleep that night. He remained in his quarters, staring at the encrypted sensor logs looping on his personal terminal. The data flickered silently, casting an eerie glow on his face. It wasn't just fear that kept him awake. It was realization, a slow, creeping certainty that everything the Zarnak had believed about humanity was wrong. He'd been trained to think in patterns: political, military, historical. Every major conflict in galactic history had followed predictable cycles: expansion, resistance, war, surrender. Even the most violent uprisings fell into that rhythm eventually. But this didn't fit. The humans had every reason to retaliate years ago, when the Concord restricted their expansion, when their scientists began vanishing in off-world accidents, when advanced tech mysteriously failed only after trade agreements were signed. They should have struck back then, but instead, they had gone quiet. Kareth replayed the footage of the Vindicator turning its cannon bays toward his cruiser. That moment, calculated, deliberate, wasn't a display of anger. It was a reminder, not just that they had power, but that they had chosen not to use it. Not yet. Why? The question gnawed at him, and the data gave no answer. Eventually, the stars shifted again. The ship entered orbit around Lorexis Prime, homeworld of the Zarnak Dominion's central government. Towering towers of glass and crystal shimmered beneath the clouds, lit by the triple suns that made this world famous for its relentless daylight. A perfect place for political posturing and ceremonial grandeur. Kareth hated it. He landed quietly, without fanfare. No announcements, no escorts. Just him and Velis, moving through the side passages of the Ministry Spire, where walls heard too much and smiles meant nothing. They reached the War Intelligence Chamber just before midday. Inside, the scent of high-grade polymers and recycled air filled his nose. A cold, clean scent designed to remind visiting officers that truth, not emotion, ruled here. The chamber was lined with ancient carvings from Zarnak conquest eras, but their presence felt out of place now, almost juvenile compared to what Kareth carried in his hands. Minister Threll stood at the head of the circular chamber. Tall, draped in ceremonial silks, and flanked by 3 high-ranking intelligence aides, he turned with casual disinterest when Kareth entered. "Captain," Threll said smoothly, "your mission report was vague. I trust you bring something substantial." Kareth stepped forward and placed the encrypted core on the table. "More than substantial, Minister. This isn't just another human patrol. We've found something the Council needs to see immediately." He tapped the console. The projection sprang to life. A full 3D model of the Vindicator rotated in the air, towering, angular, its hull etched with weapon ports, layered armor plating, and massive energy cores that pulsed like artificial hearts. Even in hologram form, the ship cast a shadow across the room. Threll's smirk faded. "What is this?" "A human vessel," Kareth said, watching the expressions around the room darken. "Designation unknown. Codename, the Vindicator. It was found operating deep in neutral territory, no beacon, no affiliation, no registry, but it wasn't hiding." He stepped closer, voice low. "It was waiting." He explained the encounter, the scan logs, the voice transmission, the unprovoked lock-on targeting. He explained the signal spike, the message sent to the Vindicator just moments before it rotated to face them. Threll interrupted. "You're suggesting the humans lured you?" "No," Kareth said. "I'm suggesting they're luring someone else." The room went silent. He continued. "This ship, it's not part of their fleet doctrine. It doesn't match any known military patterns. Its energy readings are off the scale. Its weapon systems predict movement before it happens. It's too advanced and too deliberate. They want it seen, but only by the right eyes. One of the aides leaned forward, inspecting the data stream. These reactor readings, they're not consistent with fusion or plasma systems. Kareth nodded. We thought so too. It's biomechanical. Parts of the ship pulse like muscle fibers. We think the humans are experimenting with hybrid systems, organic integration, maybe even self-regenerating armor. Threll stiffened. Impossible. That kind of tech was outlawed by the Conquered 2 centuries ago. Then they've broken the law, Kareth said, unfazed. Or maybe they've ignored the Conquered completely. Either way, we're not looking at a simple arms race anymore. We're looking at a species preparing for something we haven't seen yet. Threll studied the display for a long time. What would warrant this kind of preparation? He finally asked. Kareth hesitated. We don't know, but we're starting to suspect this has nothing to do with us. He tapped the screen, pulling up the tight beam transmission signal again. This came from deep beyond known human space. No colonies, no stations, just empty starfields. But someone, or something, is out there, and they're in contact with the humans. Threll narrowed his eyes. Are you saying humanity has allied with an unknown force? No, Kareth replied. I'm saying humanity is afraid of something, and they're building war machines like the Vindicator not to conquer, but to survive. Threll paced slowly, his silks brushing the floor. His aides murmured quietly, confusion and tension rising. Eventually, he turned back to Kareth. Do you believe this is a threat to the Dominion? Kareth answered, without hesitation. I believe the humans have seen something coming, and if we don't start asking the right questions now, it won't just be a threat to us. It will be the end of everything. Threll didn't respond immediately. He moved toward the display again, staring at the projection of the Vindicator. What do you recommend, Captain? Kareth's jaw tightened. We need to deploy scouts along the unclaimed sectors bordering human space. We need to monitor deep space signal traffic, and we need to initiate shadow talks with the Terran High Command. Threll raised a brow. You want to talk to them? We won't stand a chance if we face what they're facing alone. Threll considered this. Then, with a nod, he gave the command. Approved. Quietly. You'll lead it yourself. No council oversight. I want full deniability. Kareth saluted. And just like that, the mission changed. He was no longer just a scout captain. He was now the one trying to learn what humanity already knew. The one sent to uncover the real truth behind the Vindicator. The one who had to find out what exactly was coming from beyond the stars. The shuttle that carried Captain Kareth away from Lorexus Prime was small, stripped of all insignia, and flew under a false transponder. From the outside, it appeared to be a diplomatic courier, a disposable pawn on the board of interstellar politics. But inside, its mission was anything but trivial. The journey into deep space was long, even at slipstream speeds. Kareth sat alone, reviewing the sparse intelligence his people had managed to gather about human military movements in the last 5 cycles. Most of the reports were frustratingly vague. Fleets seen, then gone. Shipyards active, then mysteriously shut down. Colonies seemingly abandoned, only to reappear weeks later, fortified and silent. It all painted the same picture. Preparation, not expansion. They weren't building to conquer. They were building to withstand something. But what? The stars stretched endlessly around him, and still no answers came. When they reached the edge of human-controlled space, the ship dropped to sublight. Beyond this point, stealth was the only option. The humans had deployed sensor webs in their frontier regions, and any warp jump this deep would be like setting off a flare in the night. The pilot, a tight-lipped intelligence operative who hadn't shared his name, guided the ship in absolute silence. Not out of discipline, Kareth sensed, but fear. Even this close to the border, the unspoken dread of being seen by one of humanity's Black Fleet vessels was enough to make the air in the cabin feel heavy. Kareth opened his terminal and pulled up the coordinates he'd been given. Grid marker J, 9917X. A section of space, no star maps included. Officially classified as an observation blind. A dead zone used by intelligence drones to monitor human activities along unregulated sectors. But someone had changed that status. Recently, the system had no planets, no asteroid belts, just a thin curtain of dust orbiting a brown dwarf star. And hiding within that dust was something. The ship drifted quietly as they approached. No pings, no broadcasts. The sensors operated in passive mode only, drinking in what little data they could through the dust. At first, it seemed like nothing was there. Then a shape emerged. Long, angular, silent, larger than anything Kareth had ever seen. Not a warship, not a station. Something between the two. "Bring us in closer," Kareth said, eyes narrowing as the scanners built a shape from the particles around it. Slowly. As the vessel came into view, he saw the telltale glow of low-powered shielding, meant not to repel fire, but to scatter scans. The surface. Captain Kareth stood in silence as the dark chamber lit up with glowing markers, each a ghostly red dot floating above the galactic map. The scale was hard to grasp. Each light represented something massive, something alive, yet utterly unknowable. They weren't just approaching. They were spreading. Director Halver's voice cut through the still air. "We call them the Erebus." The name hung like ash in Kareth's mind. Strange, ancient. It didn't sound like anything from human history or science. It sounded more like a warning passed down from myth, a whisper of something that should have never been spoken aloud. "What are they?" Kareth asked. Halvers exhaled, as if the very question was exhausting. "We don't know. Not exactly. We've only engaged them directly twice, and both times we lost." Kareth turned to him. "Then how do you know they're coming here?" "We don't," Halver said. "We only know what they've done. Entire systems stripped clean. Civilizations erased so completely there isn't even dust left behind. And not just recently. Some of the signals we picked up in the outer sectors, those were wreckage fields older than any species we've ever encountered. The Erebus didn't just wake up. They've been moving for a long time, and we believe they're circling back." Kareth felt a chill crawl down his spine. "Circling back?" Halvers nodded. "We think this region of the galaxy, the one the Concord controls, the one you and I call home, it's not their next target. It's their last one." The archive above them flickered again, and the projection zoomed in on a particular sector. Dead space. Uninhabited, or so everyone had believed. Until now. Kareth saw the signals, movement, structure, shapes too large and too fast to be natural. They weren't just ships. They were harbingers. "This is why you built the Vindicator," Kareth said. "This is what you're preparing for." "Yes," Halvers replied. "The Vindicator class is our best attempt at countering them. Mobile fortresses, not to chase, not to conquer, just to hold the line, long enough for someone, anyone, to survive." Kareth's voice was quieter now. "And the others? The Concord, the Union, why not warn them?" "We tried," Halvers said. "Years ago, we sent probes, shared what little we had. No one listened. Too proud, too slow, and by the time they believe us, it will already be too late." Kareth closed his eyes for a moment. It all made sense now. The strange movements, the hidden colonies, the untraceable signals, the secrecy. This wasn't a war humanity had started. It was a funeral march they had been trying to delay. "I need to bring this to the Zarnak High Council," Kareth said, straightening. "If they see what I've seen—" "They'll doubt you," Halvers interrupted. "They'll call it manipulation, a human trick. Until they see an Erebus ship tear through one of their fleets with their own eyes, they won't act. And by then, they'll have no fleets left." Kareth was silent. He hated that he knew the man was right. The Dominion had always seen the humans as a rising threat, but a manageable one. Now, he saw the real threat, and it wasn't the Terrans. It was the void creeping ever closer, wearing the bones of the past like armor. "Then help me make them believe," Kareth said. "Send someone with me. Show them what you showed me." Halvers turned away, walking slowly to the edge of the room. He placed a hand on the wall. Part metal, part something else. It pulsed faintly beneath his palm. "You're asking us to break protocol, to give up the one advantage we still have: time, secrecy." Kareth stepped forward. "I'm asking you to give us a chance, because if the Erebus reach us unprepared, there won't be any more sides. No more Union, no more Concord, no more humans, no more Zarnak. Just silence." Halvers studied him. Then slowly, he nodded. "We'll give you one of the memory cores," he said. "It won't be enough to convince everyone, but it will buy you time." Kareth exhaled in relief. "And the Vindicator?" he asked. Halvers offered the smallest hint of a smile. "It won't be alone. Not anymore." Kareth left the Herald 3 hours later. He returned to his shuttle carrying something older than history, heavier than any weapon, and more dangerous than he could explain: the truth. By the time his ship crossed back into Zarnak space, it was already happening. The first Erebus signal had entered known space. It appeared in the Talari Fringe, where an outpost of 40,000 lives stopped transmitting without warning. No distress calls, no debris, no sign of battle, just a hollow silence. And on the other side of the stars, far beyond the reach of fleets and diplomats, the Erebus stirred. Not fast, not in a rush, but like a tide. Inevitable, unstoppable, and now, seen. 5 months later. The Grand Assembly of the Galactic Concord met in emergency session for the first time in 2 centuries. Captain Kareth stood at the center of the chamber, flanked by human envoys and guarded by memory cores still pulsing with stored horrors. The images were played before the gathered races, massive, shifting vessels, twisted into impossible forms, tearing through planets and stars like parchment. Some in the chamber screamed, others wept. None denied what they saw. And when the vote was called, it was unanimous. For the first time in history, the empires of the galaxy would unite, not to conquer, not to control, but to survive. The Erebus War had begun. And somewhere, across the void, deep in the shadows beyond the edge of all maps, something opened its eyes. Watching, learning, coming.